Hello, Hannah. I didn't know you would join in.
Also, it's an amazing crowd, I
So good
feel.
to see you all. Really happy to be here.
Thanks, Hannah, for coming. Thanks, everybody else, also for coming. I planned it as a initial like a discussion of three of you as I mentioned, yeah, Gabriella, Chris, and Eric. But of course, at some point in the discussion or conversation, everybody is free to comment, join, or whatever. I would like to keep it more open, like more as a conversation or discussion rather than panel discussion or lecture or things like that. There were some more people sign up, so I would just keep my eye here. There is somebody else on this chat, on not chat, but whatever this list of people joining. So yeah. But yes, thank you very much for being here, especially, of course, to my guests, but everybody else, as I mentioned as well. I'm super happy to conduct it even online and maybe, I don't know, learn something more, maybe learn different or hear different perspectives. Important for me, like in, let's say, designing those meetings was to gather people who may have different perspectives and backgrounds and experience. So here I think we have a very amazing crowd of different views on Fluxus, and not only, of course, we want maybe talk only about Fluxus. So maybe I can just very briefly introduce, just for the sake of somebody else, I know, but I don't have time to do that. So we have, as you probably all know, gathered here, Erik Andersen, who is a Danish artist associated with Fluxus. He is considered to be one of the intermediate art pioneers, and he deemed art to be a constant exploration of human expression, given that the world is constantly changing. And this is something that we'll talk about today as well. And then we have Gabriella Daris. Do I pronounce, Gabrielle, your name correctly? Yes. Who is a Greek-Canadian curator, critic, and researcher, and she is completing a PhD at the moment in philosophy at the Kingston University in London. Her doctoral thesis critically examines the concept of instruction and institution in Yoko Ono's projects. And then we have, last but not least, Chris Reeves. Is a Chicago-based creative researcher, art historian, and artist affiliated with the School of Art, the Arts Institute of Chicago. His research interests include art and technology, artist books, Fluxus performance art, punk and DIY, networks of friendships in art, and localized collaborations. I think that's really, really good. So, and I think, as you may also read in this description, and that this part of this meeting is a third in a little series of meetings that I'm doing or conducting as an additional part of my research project. And so the first meeting was strictly about the manual of the application that I created for my PhD project. So we talked about how it works, how it functions. And the second meeting last week was about event scores specifically, and the nature of event scores and the future maybe of event scores, how we can use them, perform. And there were also three other panelists in this meeting. And today is the third one, probably not the last one, but we'll see. I will keep you also informed about that. Yes, I think that maybe I will ask at first, or maybe raise a controversial or maybe not controversial question. Do you think that we need Fluxus today?
Should I answer that?
Yeah, I
I
think this
think
experience.
I think all the other people should answer it. I think Fluxus is impossible to avoid, so you have just to accept it. I don't think you necessarily needs it, but you just have to accept it. It's there and it doesn't go away. I can see on the screen here that the mics for Gabriella and Chris and Hannah and the fourth person is not open. Is that true?
Not anymore.
Okay, sure. Okay, now the mics are on. Sure.
Feedback to him.
But did everybody hear me? So you have to ask. You have to answer this question. If you need Fluxus today.
Yeah. I mean, I like what you. Yo, go ahead. Yeah.
That's nice.
So far, so good.
But you are forced to enjoy it because it is there already. It doesn't go away. Gabriella, do you need Fluxus?
Yes, we do need Fluxus. However, I feel that Fluxus remains effective as long as it is practiced in real life. So there is a problematic when Fluxus is being exhibited nowadays as like museum relics with the sign,
Sure.
the sign do not touch. Yeah. So all these non-participatory museum regulations render Fluxus quite unsuitable for a museum setting of today. Yeah.
It's very sad to see how Fluxus is shown in museums, certainly. But what can we do? What can we do? We have to change all the curators, or what?
No, but it's problematic for the new generation of, artists, young people who don't quite get the full essence of what Fluxus is.
Sure. Absolutely.
Because Fluxus is an experience, and it's not supposed to be in a white cube setting with people looking over you, whether you touch something or, So it's very restrained kind of environment today.
So like will this be good?
But you can
see that
you can still get some information independent of the.
Or in a booth. There's gonna be no one. So
there is a small museum in Roskilde in Denmark called Museum of Contemporary Art. And there we made a festival in '85 called Festival of Fantastics. And they have recently updated a link to this festival. So you can go on this link. It's called festivaloffantastics.com. And you will see Fluxus work not as is now presented in museums, but as it really took place in '85. You will find videos and descriptions. It was 10 artists meeting there. Among them was Jackson McLeod, Philip Corner, Alison Knowles, Emmett Williams, Noel and Tartas, Ben Moutier, and 10 artists in total. Also Willem de Ritter. And here you can see the real stuff, the original stuff. So if museums will just give the audience the possibility to have access to this festival and to this link, then everybody can have a real understanding of what we did in '85 and before '85.
But yes, I think there's Gabriella mentioned something quite important. I think for many people interested in Fluxus, how to not only exhibit but how to experience it. Like nowadays, whether like we have all these documentations like from this festival, also as Eric mentioned, but also all the archives and other things. But is it really like an equivalent, or maybe like does it give any like idea to maybe younger people even like or us? I haven't seen like things in the 80s. How it looks like, how we should present it in the future.
I'm sure if you go to this link and see the work there, then you will be able to perform all the works you see in your own way and in the same spirit yourself. So don't leave it to the museums, just do the work yourself. You don't need a museum. Of course, you need some kind of finance, but ask the museum to finance you doing the work instead of showing the work in the museum. And the work takes much better place outside the museum than in the museum itself. And you can see from this link, Festival of Fantastics, all the works took place outdoor and at different places, libraries, squares, shops, and all kind of places in the town. So it was the whole town that was included in this show, and not a museum at all. So just do the work. Just do the work. Don't rely on museums.
Okay, that's actually really important that you mentioned.
And you have the scores. You know the scores, so it's very easy. It's an open situation. Just get started.
So maybe the next question that comes to my mind would be like, or is, why do we need to do this even at home? Like, why?
What?
Why do we need to do this, or why should we do Fluxus at home, for example, or do the scores?
No, you don't need to do it.
And why,
just do it if you feel like it.
So maybe not why, but if somebody decides, I should frame the question probably differently. If somebody decides to perform or do some Fluxus pieces, what they would benefit from that, or like even why we should encourage them to do that?
Whenever I have done, and whenever anybody I know have done a Fluxus piece, it has been very enjoyable for them and the audience. Of course, in the beginning, people got very angry with us and started to shout at us and even tried to beat us up. But after the first few years, people have been very happy about this kind of work, and people have enjoyed it very much. So I think if you do these pieces, people will have fun, a lot of fun, and enjoy themselves, really. So nobody gets annoyed anymore about these pieces. Maybe they will in the future. That would be interesting to see. If you invite Putin or Trump to be in the audience, maybe they will be pretty annoyed and angry.
I can speak empirically. We did a Fluxus concert at the Arts Club a couple years ago. Hannah helped organize it. And we did a couple of pieces. I'm trying to remember the ones that specifically very clearly gave a lot of anxiety during the performance to the Arts Club organizers. And so I think it's a thing where, I mean, the space is also a little austere and all that too. But there's definitely a moment in watching, I think one of them was, I'm spacing on the piece now, it's a Ben Patterson piece. But the performers were making a big mess during this piece. And you could feel, I think, the palpable anxiety from the audience, because you're not supposed to use that stage in this kind of way. And so I think there's something occasionally when Fluxus is interpreted or performed in a way that's maybe a little less sanctioned by history, in these kinds of ways, I think maybe Gabriella was talking about too, there can be maybe this tendency that I've seen to reperform Fluxus in a very sort of art historical way. I think sometimes when there is that permission in a Fluxus score to improvise or to make a mess or to be transgressive a little bit, for me, I still feel quite a bit of vitality and anarchy and danger in those sorts of performances. And so I think, it's going to vary, but for the most part, my personal experience with some Fluxus performances have been very somewhat harrowing, which makes me feel like the form still has quite a bit of vitality, I think, in the performance anyway.
Well, there's not only one way to perform any of the pieces. It's an open situation, and you can do it in a million of ways, and you can have the audience to participate, and can do it in front of the audience where they don't participate. And there are millions of ways to do it. You can probably also do it in an aggressive way or in a friendly way, but there's no specific way to do any of the pieces. But I think the last time I had a negative reaction to any of the pieces I've made is probably in '64. And since then, I haven't met any hostile reactions to my pieces. And not even ignorance. People have been very interested, and they had a lot of fun, and they enjoyed it, and have been very thankful. And I would have loved if they had paid me better, but apart from that, everything had been very, very enjoyable.
Eric, don't you remember what happened when you did Please Leave at Festival of Fantastics? Do you remember that?
I
People
remember.
got pissed off.
No, I didn't get pissed off. Alison got pissed off. But I don't think you get pissed off. And Noel and Alison got pissed off, but the rest of the people had a wonderful time. And if you look at the photos, I don't have a video, unfortunately, from it, but if you look at the photo,
Everyone's smiling.
people was really enjoying themselves. Of course, the first reaction when they were entering the courtroom, and the first thing I said to them was, please leave. I want you to leave. I don't want you to stay here. Please leave. And I will do everything I can to make you leave. So, Judge, why don't you leave immediately? The reaction was a bit negative. They thought, why did we show up if you only want us to leave? But after 5 minutes, people had a wonderful time. They were eating the food I was serving them. They were looking at the videos I showed them. I think you were singing a song.
I think I did.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
I asked people if Hannah will sing a song, will you then leave? And 2 people said, okay, you leave as Hannah will be singing. And then Hannah was singing the song, and 2 people left. And they had a wonderful time leaving, I think. And,
can I say something? I think one of the most frustrating things that I see, like I teach in a university, and we'll try to set up a small scale Fluxus something or other, and inevitably someone shows up in the wrong clothes. Like they try to dress like it's 1962. On comes the bowler hat and to kind of costuming. And I think that's one of the real challenges, is the power of the photograph in limiting how people interpret these remarkably open formatted event scores. And that's, for me, I know I wasn't an invited speaker. I'm sorry. It's such an interesting topic, and so important, as we in the U.S. are living under an emerging dictatorship, and having fun and poking fun and exploring the many ways a very small set of words can be interpreted. That is the resistance, as far as I'm concerned. And Chris's Wild Flux Festival last year at the Arts Club, where Eric also was in 92. Was it 92 or 93, Eric, when you were at the Arts Club doing the lewd food and stuff? Anyway, they were annoyed that it didn't look more like the photographs of Fluxus that they've seen, which smooth out all the edges and give us a kind of calm, even soothing world in black and white, a stilled world. So for me, that's become a real challenge, is the kind of dominance of the photograph, which gives us something. But when people imitate the photographs, that's really hard for me, I got to say.
Yes, that is very depressing if that is the case. George McCunas, he loved the bowler hat.
I know, that's what's wrong with wearing one, is they sort of...
But the rest of us never performed with the bowling hat after that. We did it in the beginning because George, he wanted it was especially one piece called In Memoriam to Adriano Olivetti, where he used the bowler hat, and so we used that, of course, to please him. But you know, none of us ever agreed with George McCunas about anything. But we were kind enough to use the bowler hat because he loved it.
Yeah.
But later on, none of us has ever used the bowler hat, not even when we did the In Memoriam to Adriano Olivetti. We found other things to do because the bowler hat is not even written in the script.
Right.
So then
it is a completely open situation. You can do whatever you like to do during this piece. You don't have to have a hat at all. You can be singing, you can be doing whatever you want, stand on your head or do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to respond to Veronica's question, why do we have to perform it, or what does it do to us? And I would like to share my experience interpreting, I'd rather say, Yoko Ono's cat piece in several occasions. So I guess the first time was the time she commissioned me for the opening of an exhibition of hers in a kind of museum, non-museum setting, in a sense that it was a private villa of this painter in Vienna, Ernst Fuchs, is now dead. Not super realist, hyper realist, or whatever, this group of painters in Vienna. Anyway, so and I was reclined. I decided to recline instead on this massive yellow velvet sofa, very grandesque environment, a domestic in a sense, but very like a palazzo kind of. Anyway, so in a sense, I changed it slightly in a sense that I westernized the figure of the woman, yeah, instead of this Japanese type of position that Yoko used originally. But then I have to say that I have had the chance to perform it several times, also during her exhibitions. At one time, it was the first and last time that we created a group for a version for a group of people cutting each other's. That was in Greece, in Thessaloniki, but then in a museum setting. But then over the years, I have performed it in my own initiative in different settings, very informal, in private members clubs, in university settings, a very radical place in London called SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies. And I performed it in private parties. So what I mean to say is that every time, of course, the experience was different, but the thing is that I'm very attached to this piece. It really gives me a transformative experience. I'm a very restless person, hyperactive, and the only time I can remain still is when I perform cat piece. And because I'm a trained ballerina, I'm physically very strong, I can remain still for a very long time. So indeed in Vienna, people were very careful with their cutting. So I was in this one position for about 3 hours until I was totally naked. And I remember walking, completely the nude through all this crowd of aristocrats from Austria. That was apparently the crowd at that particular event. I mean, cat piece, of course, is a very distinct score. But I think if we think about more, no, I guess that's all I wanted to say for now, just cat piece. And I know Veronica has also performed it. I don't know if you would like to add something about your experience. I would be
Were you in Thessaloniki when Katerina Kosenko organized a big festival, performance festival there? I think it was in I don't remember the year, but it's 20 years ago or something like that.
about Fluxus, you mean?
Yeah, Fluxus was a part of it, but it was a performance festival in general. And there were also other artists, younger artists that never have been associated with Fluxus. But I was there too, and I did a performance in the Roman theater there.
Oh, lovely.
But you were not present at that time in Thessaloniki.
No, I was not. I was in London
No,
or somewhere
okay.
around the world. But when we had an exhibition of Yoko Ono in Thessaloniki at the Macedonian Museum of Contemporary Art, Momos,
Okay.
that was 2000, I don't remember now, 7 years ago.
But you know, Katerina Kosenka, she was the head of the museum in Thessaloniki, and later on she became the first director of the museum in the EMST in Athens.
You know more about Greece than I do.
Yeah. But my experience is that these pieces are being performed in a wonderful, innovative way by a lot of students. I have seen performances made at Pompidou, the Center of Pompidou in Paris, by art students from Marseille, doing wonderful work and completely free interpretations of the old scores. And I have seen students, music students in Bern, in Switzerland, doing wonderful new interpretation of the pieces. I think students are making marvelous performances, but not in museums. They are doing them by themselves in galleries or other places, private homes or in squares. Sometimes in museums, like in this case with the Center of Pompidou, but most places that just do it at the school, in the university, and so on. Doing wonderful. I can send you a lot of links to wonderful performances done by completely young students of music or art,
Yeah,
all over the world, even in Japan. And
Japan, because I was in Japan and I met this Fluxus group of young musicians, dancers, and I performed with them at John Case, Mieko Siom, and they do this like every year or every
wonderful.
month, like
Yeah.
part of
and I'm sure Mieko Siom is doing wonderful directions with these
Yes.
people.
Yes,
I'm sure she has a wonderful mind.
But
So things are happening, I guess, outside the museum, and these are the best things.
Yeah.
Also.
So I think there's actually a lot of things going on all around the world with young people doing these pieces. So there's no reason to be pessimistic. Maybe some stupid museums are making a fool of themselves, trying to make it into some kind of relic. But there are wonderful things going on everywhere.
I would like to constitute their importance, no, in the sense. But just briefly referring to your question or your comment or what you said, Gabriella. So I would just say, yeah, I performed a cut piece, and that was quite unusual experience for me. I think it was the first time also at that time. I don't know, 2017, I think, something like that I had performed a score of somebody else, like in general, and it was also very like museum settings, but in a sense that I treated it also seriously in front of the audience, and I felt also totally different than in any other situation that I would perform my own pieces or my own work, or like be in front of the audience just myself, but performing this cat piece was something different. Like there was this very weird sense of vulnerability and strength at the same time. But what I wanted also to say that actually writing my thesis or like doing this PhD project, I realized that I hadn't done that much or like at that point enough Fluxus pieces myself, and I started really doing like every day almost one piece, right, at home. And I chose specifically those pieces that I could perform like myself without any extra like props or different people who are not involved. And I have to say that that was probably the most maybe profound would be too much to say, I don't know, but important in a sense, significant experience, like personal experience. Just to I dedicated somehow like every day to a different score, but just like really deeply and like several times a day, and it's a really nice practice, I would say. Like, I started seeing those Fluxus pieces as a way of practicing something, like we practice, mindfulness, yoga, whatever. So we can practice Fluxus in a way. So yeah, I think that even, of course, students, it's amazing also doing in front of the audience, like spreading the word, educating people about that. But for me, I think that the most significant were the pieces that I had done for myself at home.
I did, I think was in 2013 or maybe 14 or around the time. I did a performance in Woods in your country at the theater. I think the theater is called Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And he had, I think it was a 25 years anniversary of the theater. And they had invited me to make a Flux performance. And there was a lot of things going on. It was a whole festival. And so it was not only my piece, it was a lot of different performances taking place. But my piece consisted of the audience doing all the performances. I had 10 performers who helped me to instruct the audience. The audience was quite a huge crowd. I think of around 200 or 300 people. And these 10 young people, students, all theater students, they helped me to instruct the audience to how to perform these pieces, these old pieces from 62 and so on. So it was all made by the audience themselves. And they did wonderful, wonderful work. So much better than the work we did back in 62. Much better. So there are millions of ways to do this. Hello, Alan. Good to see you. And I can only recommend this kind of practice. Do it in another way. Do always never do the same piece in the same way twice. Never, never, never. Change the piece all the time. Invent, innovate, invent.
I want to mention that at one time I performed cat piece in a burqa, wearing a burqa.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris, do you have some personal like have you performed with your students or?
I mean, yeah, like the students, and I think this is something around the question of vitality, but students always, especially younger students, but also graduate students, always really respond, I think, to the permissions and the freedoms of Fluxus score interpretation. I'm curious, I've been listening to everybody talk and the ways in which, like, I think if you're performing a score and you're making it your own, whether that's public or whether that's private, there seems to me to be a kind of like intensity of, especially if we're going to do it differently every time, of subtlety, right? Subtle variations of, shifting and changing the way, this written instruction is telling you maybe what to do or what you can do. And I'm curious for you all, maybe, I know like Veronica shouldn't ask questions, but I'll ask everyone a question. In your email, you were writing about, Fluxus as being something, or maybe not, important in times of crisis. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if Fluxus doesn't give us something to do with how we encounter the subtle or the small in the way that we make it ours, and how that is actually a very political thing in a moment, I think, in which, subtlety is kind of hard to find, maybe reasonably so. But I think, maybe a better way to say that is like, what Fluxus seems to give us subtlety. What does that mean in times of maybe instant feelings or something like that? So I don't know. And I came to that question kind of thinking about, Gabriella, when you were talking about performing cut piece and how that really you can shift the political resonance of that so easily based on where it's performed, based on what you're wearing, based on who you are. And so I think, as Eric is sort of saying, the fluidity of these scores, really lets us kind of dive into lots of little subtleties. And that feels very political to me, but I'm curious if this question makes sense, what you all maybe think about that idea, because subtlety, I think, is hard to find in our current moment, and it does have value still, I think. But yeah, I don't know. That's sort of what I'm thinking about as you all are talking through this.
I wouldn't use the word subtleties. I would use the word awareness. Awareness is very, very important. And most of the people I know who is working not only in the Fluxus network, but also with intermedia in general, they are actually very sensuous people. Sensuality means a lot to them. And most of them are, in fact, hedonistic, mostly hedonistic people. And they enjoy themselves. And whenever we met back in 62 and even before 62 and the years in the 60s as such, we didn't come together with finished work. I didn't show up with 3 or 4 works that I wanted to do my way. And George McCullers came with his work, and he had the idea of how to do the work, but we never did it his way. But most people, we just met, and then we changed the ideas. We talked about it, what to do, how to do it. And we changed the work during these talks we had. So we made the program together. It was not a situation where we brought in like a concert, a traditional concert, that we brought in the scores, and then we taught the musicians how to play the scores. We brought in the proposals, and then we discussed the proposals and found a specific way to do the pieces at that time in that place. Because if the piece is not the same if you perform it in a big hall or in a small hall, or if you perform it with 200 people or you perform it with 10 people. So, and if it is in a museum or if it is in an art fair or whatever, you change the piece all the time, and you are aware that you are doing it. You don't do it as a robot. It's not an algorithm you are performing. You are doing it as a sensuous person, as a person who cares about what is going on at the time.
Hi.
Concerning the political situation that Veronica wrote about, don't be so pessimistic. It will finish one day. I mean, Putin and Trump doesn't live forever. And of course, the sad thing is not these 2 characters. The sad thing is a majority of people are voting for them. But you have these backlash going on all the time. You have 10 years of wonderful freedom and experimentation and so on. And then you get these backlashes where people are trying to undo whatever had happened before. So don't be pessimistic. It will change. It's just we have a few stupid years in front of us now. But who cares?
Okay, it's Gabriella. Do you want?
Oh, yes, to respond to Chris with regards to the idea of changing or responding to the score in a different way. So generally, I don't use those common art historical terminologies such as reperformance or reenactment, something of a repetition of the same. So I have a big problem with those terms. So in my project on Yoko Ono, which I'm about to complete, I'm working with the concept of not the interpretation as such, but actually translation. Yeah, especially I'm using the concept of translation as in the work of Walter Benjamin, but then I also sort of reconceptualize it, if you like, in a sense that for me, and I would be interested to see what Eric has to say, who is interested in the concept of expression. So for me, translation comes closer to the notion of communication, to language. So I'm less interested in performance and more interested in language, because it's a more wider sort of concept, if you like. Performance comes out of language, but for me, communication and means of expression is the most important here, in a sense that when we translate a score, probably written by someone else or not, we translate it, but then when a few days later we go back to the score, we also translate it, So we don't repeat anything. And then, in a sense, we translate. So in the course of having performed it today and 3 days later, this period is a period of reflection and self-reflection. So then what we do essentially three days after the first performance or translation is that we translate our own translation, because it's been embodied. This translation of the score is an embodied experience, our very own experience. So if you think about this notion of the process, and to go back to another question Veronica sent on her email about, I think, activity or process, no, it was more a way of living, but practice maybe comes closer. But I think about the notion of process and project, and this idea of self-realization, which is the notion of Bildung, is a German romantic concept, which is, anyway, so for me, to go back to the scores again and again is a very philosophical practice, because in philosophy we read Kant and Adorno, whatever, until we are dead. We don't just read the book once. It's not a novel. It's a different experience. So for me, the experience of art, of the score, this particular form, is a philosophical experience. So I go back again, and I always discover something new, because it's essentially language, It's nothing else but language. It's not a picture, it's not a painting, it's language. So therefore, for me, the concept of translation is a stronger concept to think about my relation to the instruction or the score form, that's it. That's what I want to say.
So is it a...
But that's wonderful. Just continue. And we don't forget that performances take place in time. It's not an object. A performance is not an object. It's not something that you can put on the wall or put on a stand. It takes place in time, so it changes all the time. Don't ignore time as the most central element of performances at all.
But thinking about time, for me, perhaps that's why I'm so interested in Yoko Ono's instructions, because they are ontologically distinct and metaphysically significant, precisely because they are meant to be formed, performed, or transformed in the imagination, at least the majority of them. So in that sense, they are future-oriented. They project to the future. They are a project. They are part of the project, because by realizing, they project the future in a sense that they are realized in the present. They realize in the present a non-actualized possibility of the future, of some kind. So thinking about time when the work remains in one's imagination, I feel it's a stronger experience. It's a metaphysical experience. Whereas when we do something, it has a goal, it has an end. And that's how Yoko Ono's instructions differ from Lamont Young's and George Brecht's and Mieko Siomi's. They all have a means-end sort of logic. And especially, Brecht and Lamont and Mieko Siomi and Lamont Young, they want to perform them either for themselves or, more precisely, usually for an audience. They are not so esoteric, I would say. So Yeah.
But if you take all the event scores by George Brecht, it can be done. It's entirely open situations, and it's not. It's like with, as you mentioned, with Yoko Ono. It's the same. It's the same story with the event scores by George Brecht and many other pieces. It's a completely open situation, and even Yoko, she never performed the same piece twice in the same way. Never.
Yeah. Of course.
She always changed the pieces to fit the situation.
But the thing is that when something is unperformable in terms of being physically realized, that's the distinction I'm thinking about. The imaginary. In terms of time and the temporality of existence. So it's a little bit different, if you see what I mean.
Sure.
If I'm following, I mean, I think there's a really beautiful idea that, event scores inherently are going to carry a belief in the future. And I think it's something, for me, like Brecht, there is a totalizing holistic thing that I get from this. It is, I think, a bit distinct sometimes. Like, I feel like, yeah, drip music can be happening all the time, all over the place, which I think is a beautiful idea.
Sure.
And in a very different way, I think Yoko Ono's are sort of, it seems quite often about the performing of something. So I think, like for me, it's rare that I see even like my wife had to get spinal surgery, and there was a Dick Higgins piece. I forget the exact wording, but it, have a piece of your spine removed, which feels like a very, impossible piece. But when she had the surgery, she would say that she had performed this. And so there's something I think about, these things, even if they feel impossible, they can catch up with you and can catch up with time. And so I think there's something, they're all unique and have these variations, but I do think, and what you're saying is making me feel, this really strong point that I think is really wonderful and political. That is, they all do seem to suggest that there is a future, right? That something will occur or can occur. And I think that feels very important to me, I think.
I would like to give you an example of a piece we did in Nikolai Church in '62. It was a piece by Dick Higgins. I think it was called Constellations. I don't remember the number. Maybe Hannah remember the number of the constellation. But the piece is very simple. You are a group of people, you enter stage, and before you enter stage, each of you decide when to leave, but without telling the other performers when you want to leave. So you, for example, you go into the stage and then you decide if a woman on the third row is going to turn her head, then I will leave. And another person decides that if the light turns off in the room, then I will leave. Or if there's a certain sound that appears, then I will leave, and so on. But you keep it a secret. Everybody has their own reason to leave and keep it as a secret. So we went in there, and since it was in a church, there was a lectern where the priest normally stands and makes lectures for the people entering the church. And Emmett decided he would hide at this lectern so the audience couldn't see him, and there he would stay until everybody had left from the audience. And he brought a beer so he could have a comfortable time. At that time, we were all smoking, so he was sitting with an ashtray as well. And he made himself very comfortable inside this lectern with drinks and cigarettes. And I had decided that I would leave when Emmett left. And so I was standing in the middle of the stage waiting for Emmett to leave from the lectern. But of course, I didn't look at him, because then I would in this way tell the audience that somebody was sitting in the lecture. So I just ignored him and was waiting for him to stand up and leave. And it went on for 40 minutes. And everybody else left. I think we were 8 or 10 people. Everybody else left because they had decided for something to happen, and it happened, and they left. So I was standing there completely alone in the stage, and Emmett was sitting there having a wonderful, comfortable time drinking beers. And people, for 40 minutes, they were just looking at me, and then they tried, after 10 minutes, then they tried to make me leave so they could have other performances going on. So they came and it was like, please leave. They tried to convince me to leave by doing favors to me. They offered me cigarettes and beers, and they would carry me around. They would do everything for me if I just would leave the place, please. But I was just standing there. I didn't accept any of the wonderful offers I was given. And the only reason for Emmett to leave was that he has to go to the toilet. So after 40 minutes, he went out of the lecture and went to the toilet, and then I could leave after 40 minutes. This is a wonderful example of a score and how it can be performed in a way that was never to be understood before the score was written.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, most of the scores are not written before they are performed. They are written after the performance takes place as kind of memory and a communication to the rest of us, because we were sitting in different parts of the world and we were communicating with email, not with emails, but with mail. And so we wrote to each other about the scores as a report of what had happened here and there. So most of the scores are written after the performances has taken place. That's why they are so completely open, because they were never intended to be performed only in one way. And we would have been extremely bored if we had to do this kind of work as a repertoire. And Hannah was complaining about that these works are being done now as a repertoire in many places. And people try to imitate photos that they see. But they were never meant as a repertoire. They were meant as open situations that should change and take time seriously. And they were never meant as concepts. It was never concepts that were performed. It was sensuous phenomena that we took part in and enjoyed to take part in. And we were not trying to convince anybody about anything. We just wanted to have a wonderful time.
So maybe after also Chris really nicely summarized, I think, and also maybe this comment of bringing us to the future and Eric about the experience of that. Maybe because you already have been here for 1 hour, we should open for a moment. Maybe somebody has some questions or comments from so-called audience or participants that are not very active. Because I feel we touch upon so many wonderful things. I think it's just like my head explodes. It is exploding, but maybe somebody wants to add something more to this.
I think we have a duty to convince the audience that they should not sit there as passive cows and look at something. They should try to take part in what they were looking at, and
That's
they should try to be aware of their own situation instead of staring at something else. They should take themselves seriously. It's good, Alan.
Yes, being serious now. That's no, I'm really serious. Does anybody have any questions at this? Or yes, I think we should probably slowly wrap it up. Or comments or reflections. If not, Hannah, do you want to add something at the end, maybe before we finish?
I don't want to dominate, but
Please dominate.
It's such a pleasure to see everyone. And this idea of retroactively scoring is incredibly like it makes me want to sort of laugh and say thank you, because it means we can actually look backwards and forwards, right? It sort of unravels the exclusivity of futurity, which I think is something that's gotten us as cultures in so much trouble. The idea of the directionality of time, and what I think this emphasis on the sensuous does is it evokes the very many ways that we inhabit time, so that we can be thinking about the performance of a piece in one epic and rejecting it in another and absorbing it in another. So this idea of taking an audience, taking oneself seriously, I think is extremely fertile terrain. Especially if they know the score or can enjoy a game of trying to imagine how this thing is possibly written down. It creates remarkable tension lines along what we think the power of language is. I'm not sure language is necessarily the organizing principle around these works. I mean, I think it's how we score them, but if we're embodied beings, then there may be it may be a weak translation sometimes. So but thank you. I mean, and your optimism, Eric, about getting past this moment is something I will try to take to heart. It's so strange and so frightening here right now. So thank you for that too. Yeah, I guess time heals all wounds.
But I think we should be aware of one thing, that art and culture are two completely different things, that they are the opposite of each other. Culture is trying to make us think the same way, behave the same way, have a consent, and to make a consensus. Art is asking the questions culture can never answer. We have to keep this in mind all the time. It has not only to do with Fluxus, it has to do with all important art, that art asks the questions culture cannot answer. And this will go on forever. Also in difficult times, there will still be art. It cannot be suppressed.
Right.
They can try to suppress it for some time being, but it will never work in the long run. Art will always pop up with new questions that culture can never respond to. So be optimistic. Maybe it will happen before you die, but then other people will be able to enjoy it.
But at least in this difficult time, I think we can take some little moments in Fluxus or whatever score we read or perform, just to have this moment of relief. Maybe, I don't know.
Sure, it was enjoyable, and but don't be pessimistic. Having a fun time, please. Enjoy yourself.
To sort of build on what Eric was saying, culture teaches us scripts for how to interact with each other, sort of little rituals and scripts. So we're given lots of scripts, and I see Fluxus scores as playing around with those scripts, violating them, turning them on their heads, being playful, or it can be a serious sort of revolution in the normal scripts. And after I learned about Fluxus, I realized that I had sort of heard something similar to this. There was a sociologist named Garfinkel, and I think he was sometime in the 50s or 60s, And his methodology was to go around and disrupt. He would figure out what is the traditional script here. Like when you greet someone and you say, hello, how are you? And they say, I'm fine. And so he went around and started identifying what sort of the traditional script was, and then he started messing with them. He started violating them just to see how people would react. And this was sort of his method of sociology of kind of figuring out what was going on through disruption. And that's really influenced a lot of how I think about Fluxus scripts.
I don't think Fluxus respond very much to the stigma of culture. I think Fluxus is, as all art, is completely different. It's independent. It's trying to be independent of the stereotypes of culture. It's not playing with them at all. It's trying to do something completely different. And again, I want to tell a little funny joke about Andersen and Dick Higgins. Dick wanted to make this press because he came from a rich family and he could make a press publishing books, art books that was not a part of the culture. And so we went on with friends and to discuss what to call this publishing house. And he came back after one of these meetings to Andersen and said, Andersen, we have agreed on a name. I don't remember the name actually, but I think it was something like funny
Shirt sleeves.
Shirt
sleeves.
Yes,
sleeves. like labor, right?
Yeah,
labor,
yeah.
shirt sleeve.
We have decided on shirt leaves. What do you think? And then Andersen looked at him very skeptical and said, why do you call it something else? So we called it something else. And that's the same with culture. When art looks at culture, we tell ourselves, why don't we do something else? We don't want to make a paradigm. We don't want to make criticism necessarily. We don't want to teach people. We don't want to be didactic. We just want to do something else. Because culture is stereotyped and it is completely dangerous to our minds. So let's forget about culture.
With this thought in mind, I think we should probably wrap it up because I don't want to keep you also too long. Maybe there will be another time and chance to discuss about some other things. So yes, again, thank you very much for being here.
You're welcome.
Really a pleasure and honor to have everybody and
having a wonderful time and go and perform these scores in a new way, please. Don't repeat yourself ever.
That's a very good motto for the punchline for our.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you.
organizing, Veronica.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for having me.